Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 10th Great Debate. So it looks a little bit different this year because of COVID, but it's gonna be great anyway. I ask that you guys make sure that your cameras are turned off and that your mics are muted the whole time, except for our debaters. And also don't use the chat function to discuss things that are going on. We'll have a time at the end for Q&As for the debaters. So you guys can utilize any questions or anything you have during that time. So just make sure you guys aren't talking in the chat the whole time because that can be a little bit distracting. Yeah, and so we will be sending in the Google form for the Q&A questions through the chat. But other than that, the chat should be not used. So we have three groups this evening. We have our Young Americans for Liberty. We have UC College Republicans, and we have UC Democrats. And then we have our moderator, Kate McLaughlin, who is going to be going over our rules with us.
Okay, so the rules of this debate are there's going to be 90-second opening, a 60-second rebuttal, and a 60-second closing. Each of the groups have two extra time cards that will give them 30 seconds extra for their debate if they would like to use it. And each time, if they would like to talk, they will raise their hand and I will pick on them. It does not go in a specific matter, but it will be even and it will not be biased. So at this time, if anybody doesn't have any questions, we'll get started with our first question. You guys ready? Yeah, y'all can just nod, okay. So in light of recent protests and riots about police actions, how do you suggest we work toward a solution across the nation? Someone needs to raise their hand so I can pick on you. What?
So raise your hand.
You have to raise your hand. What?
Yeah, we're going down and doing opening statements.
Opening statements, yeah. So whoever wants to start can go. Okay, Libertarians, it's you.
Wonderful. Thank you all for coming. First of all, I want to say that and being here in this different space, we appreciate you all for joining us for this great debate. So we have seen during this time with coronavirus pandemic spreading the way it has, that our enemy is not the person or our neighbor who does not wear a mask. It is the inefficiency and the corruption and the lack of wherewithal in our government. That government has become too big and gotten too big for its power, and it doesn't understand what it needs to do at the times when people are in need. We have people starving, we have people who have lost their jobs, millions on unemployment, and we still have politicians fighting about whether they get what they want in a stimulus bill. People still playing politics. The elite of our politics and the elite of money have taken over, and the people no longer have a say in what is happening. It is time to take that power back from the government and reduce its influence on what we are able to do and allow people to make the choices for themselves and their families. Because at this time, the government is our biggest enemy.
All right, thank you, Young Americans for Liberty. Also, the College Republicans are grateful for the event and to be here with everybody. And on the question of police reform in light of the recent riots, to me, the issue is not with our police, and it is not an issue that should be addressed on the federal level. If there will be police reform, the police reform should be addressed locally, keeping to the principles of federalism. And the police historically have improved over the last few decades, are only continually improving. And we do not need to address the problems that came up in the riots should not be addressed with police reform, but should be addressed with reforming the communities in which that are being policed. Is there anything you want to add to that? Okay.
Addressing your first question, first of all, Black Lives Matter. And then the protests over police brutality against America's Black community have created the largest movement in American history. I suggest we start working towards a solution by listening to their outcry. First of all, African Americans can never have a fair shot at the American dream as long as the systemic racism is allowed to quietly chip away at their opportunity. To achieve a solution for our nation, we need to immediately work to root out systemic racism from our laws, our policies, and from inside our institutions. Thank you.
Okay, Young Americans, we'll go back to you to answer the questions since y'all went with a opening statement first. Sorry about that.
I just really wanted to talk about coronavirus, guys. I thought that was the biggest thing. Forget all this other stuff. No, my apologies. I did not hear the question correctly. Great job, Kate. It was my fault. So on the point, so we've seen obviously a great focus on police reform, which is necessary. But I think we have to be structured and strategize correctly about what we want and what we're asking for here. So one thing that we need to focus on is demilitarization of the police. We've seen the police over time get progressively more militarized and become something that they weren't originally intended to be. We have seen civil asset forfeiture that is unacceptable, that we can't allow. We have seen no-knock warrants, something that we need to end. We have seen not only Breonna Taylor is not the first case. And if we do not get rid of no-knock warrants, you won't be the last case where we have an issue where rights were violated, innocent people were killed, and something was done and injustice occurred. We have to end qualified immunity. We have seen time and time again where a cop commits an injustice, violates someone's rights, and they can lean on the fact that they have a badge and therefore they get off scot-free. That's something that we can no longer accept. Our problem is not just Black people being shot by the cops. Our issue is not to just reduce the amount of Black people being shot to the same rate that white people are being shot. Our goal is to make sure that no one is being shot unarmed by the police and injustices are not happening, that rights are not being violated by the police department, and that the government is not sanctioning those actions.
Okay, so at this time we will begin our rebuttal. Who would like to rebuttal first? And it can be to anything anyone has said. Okay, UC Democrats.
Yeah, I disagree with what the Republicans have said in the fact that this isn't a local issue. This is clearly a federal issue. The police themselves are a federal institution that are based on federal procedures and federal laws that have been outlined by judges. So this is a systemic issue. This isn't something that is just fixed locally. Police don't just make up their own rules depending on where they live. So this is something that has to be taken federally, and we've seen that through nationwide protests. This isn't just something that's local.
Okay, thank you, UC Democrats. Would anyone like to rebuttal? College Republicans.
All right, so I think a lot of the issues that we're looking at here with various different incidents that are happening with police, I think the key thing that people miss in these national conversations is that a lot of these are complicated problems, and I think a lot of them are, very local. They're dealing in many cases with local police departments. Obviously, if you go to places like Portland, in that case, you're not necessarily talking about a local police department. You're talking about federal agents, and I think that's a somewhat different. Conversation there. I think the real thing that we need to be getting at with these various different problems and these various different sets of policy solutions that I'm sure we're about to start discussing is both where the problem lies, what is contributing to those problems, where those contributions are coming from, where they're coming from more or less, and where the effects are actually landing. And then I think you also need to look at realistically what your different policy prescriptions are going to affect and what effect on the actual people that the police are serving that's going to have.
Thank you, College Republicans. Young Americans for Liberty.
Where specifically we can do the work. So I'm glad he made that point. One place that we can start is by ending the drug war. If we end that, we kind of knock out a large portion of where many of these issues are lying at. If we want to talk about race, if race is a part of the issue, which I agree that it is, ending the drug war would be a major part of it, because you can make the case pretty easily that the drug war started due to our ideology. So that is the first thing we need to do. By eliminating that, we bring back lives that have been lost. We allow people to continue to be a part of this economy, be a part of this democracy. and we create a better system for everyone.
Thank you, Young Americans for Liberty. Would anyone like to rebuttal? Okay, Republicans.
So I think Young Americans for Liberty, Julius, I think you bring up a really great point there. And I think that kind of gets at some of the things that I'm talking about here, is that these problems are a lot more complex and a lot more deep-seated than just the media snapshots of them that you'll see on CNN or Fox News, where you'll have an incident and you'll have violence between two individuals. And I think what people do miss in this conversation is that these problems have a root cause. That altercation happened for a reason. There are extenuating circumstances in all of these on both sides that are leading to those altercations. And I think a lot of that nuance gets lost in this conversation when you just shift it to all cops are bad, defund the police, these blanket overarching solutions that wipe out the nuance in many of these local communities, that wipe out all the good that the police departments are doing, and that also, on the other end, wipe out all of the bad policies, including elements of the drug war, including no-knock warrants that are exacerbating these conditions within these local communities.
Thank you, Republicans. Democrats, would you like to respond?
I would just like to say that I don't think the problem is on both sides necessarily. I don't think the African American community, it's pretty obvious that the blame isn't on them for what's happening systemically against them.
I'd also like to add something as well. I think that the problem can be solved by implementing little things. I mean, what we've seen is that a lot of the problems arise when there's interaction between two people. Like the Republicans have said, it's when an altercation occurs. But that can be solved, I think, relatively easy with, not easy, obviously, but my parents worked in inner city Cleveland in schools there, and they had to have training on how to interact with different people of different afflictions. And I believe that police officers should have the same responsibility to do that, as they're interacting with many different individuals on a daily basis. They should have training for that.
We'll go back to Young Americans for Liberty.
Okay, I think the Dems make a great point there. The police do need some reform in their actions and what they're doing. They are, they have a lot of roles right now, and there are a lot of nuance to what they do, going into different communities and all that. But I think the problem is not in the individual police force itself. It's more of the people who write the laws that they enforce. It's, again, the drug war, gun laws especially is another big one. When you take away guns from people, they can't defend themselves a lot of the time. And then that really brings in a lot of complications with how the police interact in their community.
Republicans.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think something that's important to remember is that law enforcement is one of the few legitimate roles that government is supposed to be serving. And I don't think the data actually backs up as it doesn't show that the problem is as big as people make it out to be. There was I think it's almost over 300 million police interactions in 2019, and a small, minute fraction of them resulted in excessive use of force or an inappropriate use of force. And not every use of force is inappropriate, so you can't just go based off of raw statistics. And to contribute all of the disparity to systemic racism, the Democrats were saying earlier that is a systemic problem. I think there's an error of just because a disparity exists doesn't mean that the disparity is due to bias. There's a wide array of cultural factors that cause these disparities. And placing too much blame on law enforcement is just going to make the solution harder to come by and not easier. I think most law enforcement are well-trained, and the ones with more experience do better.
If anybody else would like to respond, do you guys want to go? You haven't gone around. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to what he said about it being a small statistic of people who actually are affected by this. We're giving people a lot of power by giving them the role of a police officer. They're able to potentially kill people. And I feel that if they're given that role, we should be fixing that regardless of if it's a small problem in the nation or not, which clearly it's not if a lot of people are protesting and rioting regarding this. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yes, I don't think the blame is just on the police department. It's not. The blame, it's a systemic problem in all facets of life.
Young Americans for Liberty.
Yeah, I agree with the last statement by the Democrats, but I have to respond to our friends on the Republican group. I think a lot of what's happening right now is for some reason, there's a lot of explanation of why bad things aren't happening, or trying to explain the discrepancy in some way rather than attacking the reform that we have all said that we would want to see. I think if we're going to talk about that this problem is systemic, we have to get at what is at the root of the systemic issue. And every time it leads back to one main point, and that is that the government has corrupted itself. It has become overrun with power, and it is too big to handle what's happening. It has too much power to decide what gets enacted. So if someone has bias, that bias gets put into the law. If you want to do stop and frisk, that gets put into the law, and now that becomes a thing. And now it continues. Now the cop might not be racist, but it is happening due to the bias of someone who made the law.
Julius. Okay. Republicans, you mentioned that you want to go next.
I'll address a couple of points here really quickly. The first one is the incident, the question of police use of deadly force against civilians, I think, is a very small issue. You have these incidents that get blown up on social media, and it does create the perception that this is a much larger issue than it actually is. If you look at the actual statistics, in Cincinnati 2019, only 3 people were shot by police, none were killed. In New York, which is traditionally, seen as a slightly more violent city, in 2018, unfortunately, I couldn't pull stats for 19. You only have 10 shot, 5 killed. And then you go into those 5 killed, you have some of those might be legitimate, some might not be. So you're talking about percentages of percentages of percentages, and the original percentage is very small here. And then to address the point the Libertarians made, I think you guys have brought up a lot of great points. And I do want to say that on our side, I don't think we are diametrically opposed to any sort of police reform. But the issue you are going to have there is if you're implementing more reform, more training, more of those sorts of elements, that is going to cost money. So I think it does kind of run counter to the traditional argument of defund the police.
That's fine. Democrats?
Look, you guys keep on calling this a very small issue, and it's not for the African Americans affected. African Americans are far more likely to be pulled over for a nonviolent crime than anybody else. That's a countrywide issue. It's not small for them.
Yeah, you say that we're making police brutality into too small of an issue, especially revolving around Black Americans. And I would argue that you're making other cultural aspects and problems with our society too small of an issue by inflating the problem that we have with our police so much. One of the leading causes of death for young Black Americans is homicide, and that is not homicide by the hands of police. And when you talk about reforming the police, I think a common narrative is to defund the police, to take some of their power away, to give them less resources. And like I said, federally, I don't think we should be looking at it federally, because every locality is going to have its own unique need for policing. But the distraction of focusing so much on police brutality takes away from all the benefits that police provide to society. So wherever you're defunding the police, you're defunding a resource that a lot of people in those areas are utilizing. People, as many people that get harmed by police, there's people in those communities that also call them.
Hi, I'm over here now. Nope. Okay. So to the point, here I am. Nope. Don't worry about it. It may be a small issue in terms of numbers, but anytime rights are being violated, we consider that a big issue. And race is a part of it. I do believe that that's a thing that we have to talk about and discuss. But no one's rights should be being violated. Too many Americans are being shot unjustly. I don't care how small the number is. One violation is too many. And if civil rights are being violated, that is something that is unacceptable and we can't tolerate as American citizens, and it should not be defended at any point.
Can I add on something to that? So in adding on to Julius, I mean, it's not just an issue of people being shot at all. It's also, you know, within the last 1.5 years, actually, I have some stats. Some policeman shot a 10-year-old while trying to kill a non-threatening family dog. Policeman still has his job who stole over $200,000. Inmate, locked an inmate in a sewage cell. Okay. They threw gas grenades in an innocent woman's empty home, and they also picked up a mentally ill man and dropped him off at the county border where he was hit by a car at dusk.
Look, I just want to bring up a point. The Republicans just said the #1 reason for death of African Americans was by homicide, and it's not, it's by heart disease. And then second of all, they said we're advocating for defunding the police. We're advocating for police reform, necessary police reform that needs to happen in our country.
Yeah, and I want to bring up a point that defunding doesn't necessarily mean defunding. It really means reallocation, and we're talking about cultural differences within police stations. I mean, inner city police officers are largely not from the inner city itself, and these cultural differences are obviously bleeding through. So if we reallocated funds to perhaps psychologists that could be on scene with police officers to go help someone who's mentally ill or help like a homeless altercation, that would benefit greatly, more so than just completely defunding the police. I don't think we're advocating for that at all.
So I do want to address your earlier comment about heart disease. I think there might have been a little bit of miscommunication there. I think the intention of that statistic being conveyed is that when you actually look at crime statistics, unfortunately, you do have these things happening more predominantly in poor and minority neighborhoods. And that means both perpetrated and victims. If you look at, and again, I'm going to go to New York City 2019, African Americans were 56% of the murder victims, 38% of the rape victims, 29% of the robbery victims. These communities are being terrorized by these different things. And unfortunately, you do have to deal with an element where you have to police these sorts of actions. And as far as some of the individual cases you brought up, I think that goes very well to what we're saying, that all of these things need to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Every one of them is going to be different. And I think maybe you could solve them with more training, maybe with some resource allocation with different things. I do think that that would probably end up increasing budgets. But I think these things need to be looked at on an individual basis, not on a broad scale approach.
Would anyone like to go next, or we can start our, or you, okay, you guys go next.
So I don't know how this quickly became a debate about the oppression of African Americans in this country, but it quickly devolved into that. This problem is bigger than that. As big as that issue is on its own, this is bigger than that. This is a thing that happens to everyone and to too many people across this country. I think we focus on individual cases because they illuminate the cases that have not been heard. These are the cases that we can point to directly. It helps us create a storyline to show the injustice and the oppression that is happening due to the militarization of our police, due to no-knock warrants, due to qualified immunity, and due to unjust shootings of people, not only Black people, but too many different types of people across this country. That is unacceptable. And this is not just about race. It is about the coalition of America and how we can protect ourselves and not continue to murder our own citizens.
Yeah, we agree with the Libertarians in that these civil injustices aren't something to be taken lightly. These are obviously debilitating our country, as we've seen nationwide protests and riots. We really need to concentrate, again, on training and reallocation of our police institutions. This is something relatively, again, these are big issues, but small things that could potentially help in the end.
We need to work on systemic racism in the country in all aspects, and we need to work on our nation's healing as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start our closing statements now. Republicans, would you like to go first?
So I think every side here has brought up really good points about how complex this issue is. I think what it boils down to, in our view, is that these instances of police shootings that so commonly get brought up in the media, I think realistically, these are small incidents, but what the libertarians articulated very well is that every one of these things that do end up being unjust do need to be looked at and handled, and we need to try to prevent these in the future. But I think the conversation where it isn't and where I think it needs to go is why are these situations devolving into confrontations between people and police? What are the issues that are causing that? What laws or maybe policies are unjust or wrong or ineffective that need to be looked at and solved? I think we need to start tackling this problem much more before it devolves to a violent situation between a cop and a person, because at that point, the reality is in many situations, the cop has no choice. And I think a lot of these different scenarios, that's what it comes down to. I think we need to be focused on preventing those. I think we need to, like you guys said, broaden the conversation past just instances of police brutality and look at some of the underlying issues that are feeding into this.
Young Americans for Liberty, would you like to do your closing statement now?
Hey everyone. So I think we've talked about a few things here. I think that this conversation became about something that is important to the conversation, but it became the focal point. And it didn't become the focal point for the correct reason. Race is a major part of what is happening and what is going on with police reform and why it is needed. But again, I'm going to keep digging in the point. Injustice that happens to anyone is an injustice to us all. Injustice that happens anywhere is an injustice everywhere. We cannot allow people to be killed unjustly and allow that to continue. We cannot not allow no-knock warrants to happen where someone accidentally gets shot and we just let it go because, oh, it was just an accident. It was a life or death situation. No, that is unacceptable. We cannot allow these things to happen. Power is obviously a thing that controls a lot of people. And right now the government has too much of it and is utilizing it to abuse its citizens inappropriately. And we need to stop that.
Democrats, your closing statement now, please.
Look, I think the conversation went there because the question was about the protests in America. And the protests in America are for Black Lives Matter because police brutality negatively affects African Americans more than it does any other population.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that these aren't new. I mean, we're discussing this now, but police reform has been a big thing. I mean, if you looked at the riots and protests in the 1960s, those weren't new. And also with Rodney King in the 90s, police reform needs to happen. And this is clear. This is just the boiling point really for our nation. And people either need to wake up and agree or we're just gonna add more fire to the flame.
Okay, thank you everyone. We're gonna start with our second topic now, combating COVID. The question is, how should leaders have initially responded to the virus and what policies should be put in place to battle the coronavirus going forward? Would anybody like to start? For opening statements, Young Americans for Liberty.
Okay. Yeah, so government leaders really need to step aside for the free market to come in and combat COVID instead. Reflexively locking down entire countries is really proven not to really work that well, and it's having very disastrous consequences. You can see that the government can't even stick to their own narrative. They flip-flop on all levels. Even like the global World Health Organization, in the beginning they praised China's draconian lockdowns as saving lives, but now they're saying that lockdowns should be practiced by no government and they only make poor people poor. You have the federal government in America blocking testing from being made by private companies due to FDA regulations. And now those regulations are gone. I mean, are they even necessary in the first place? You have states limiting who you can see, which businesses can open and which can close. I mean, they're basically acting as kings with decrees at the flick of a wrist. You can see the working class doing very poorly and small businesses shutting down all across the country, while corporations with billions of dollars of market capitalization are experiencing new highs in the stock market because they've been bailed out by the government. So Trump did do a poor job, but we do think that giving people and private businesses the freedom to choose their own policies is the correct solution.
Thank you, Young Americans for Liberty. Who would like, Republicans, you can go next for your opening statement.
All right, so our general belief in responding to COVID-19 is that governments need to be dedicated to informing their populations about the realistic threats and consequences of both the virus and their decisions, and then acting in their rational best interest. And unfortunately, as we see all across the world from the earliest days of this pandemic, which seem to be getting earlier and earlier the more and more we find out what was happening actually in Wuhan. From the earliest days of this pandemic, every step of the way, almost every government on this planet has utterly failed to do that. We see that the virus transformed from a regional epidemic that could have been contained to a global pandemic as a result of the Chinese Communist Party not being transparent, suppressing information, and then acting against the best interests of their citizens, who were the first victims of this, by suppressing access, not allowing access to Wuhan, to the different medical staff and knowledge that they had at the time, and then allowing 5 million people to leave Wuhan all over the world. Now you have here these draconian lockdowns that are not realistic and not proportional to the threat that we are facing. From the earliest days of these lockdowns in the United States, the intention was to buy hospitals 14 days, 15 days to slow the spread, 30 days to slow the spread, 6 months to kill the economy. This was meant to buy hospitals time in order so they could respond. It turned into crushing the virus. That is not a realistic goal with a novel virus. You cannot prevent its spread. We need to be focused on maximizing the best interest of the American people in a holistic sense, and that includes economically.
Thank you, College Republicans. UC Democrats.
Look, today the trajectory of COVID-19 in America is still headed the wrong way. We are only 4% of the world's population, yet we have 25% of the world's cases and deaths. Instead of downplaying the science and not taking hundreds of thousands of deaths in our nation seriously, we need to instead efficiently work to end the pandemic as soon as possible. To do that, we need to test and trace far better than we have been, sufficiently supply PPE for all, use science-based treatments and safe vaccines, open our economy successfully by doing it safely, and protect those at high risk, including our older Americans. The health of our nation, our economy, hang in the balance.
Okay, who would like to go next? Young Americans for Liberty.
All right, so yes, all those things are necessary. We do need to contact trace. We do need to take it seriously. It is a serious illness, but you cannot have the federal government doing all those things. Like I was saying earlier, they can't even stick to their own stories. First, I mean, if you remember in the beginning when the US Surgeon General got on TV and told everybody not to wear masks, they don't help you at all. That was partly because we didn't have masks for our actual healthcare workers, but he also truly believed that they did not work. Did he really want to kill people? No. The federal government is not responsible enough to hold our lives in their hands. We need to take control of our own lives.
Look, we agree the current administration has made a mess of how to take care of this, and they have constantly flip-flopped. We're in agreement there. But however, telling the government to step aside during a national pandemic does not seem like a great idea to us. We need better, we agree. We need better leadership. We shouldn't have the administration flip-flopping like they have said, like you should wear masks and you shouldn't. We should allow people like Dr. Fauci to be able to speak on his own without having the pressure of politics on him.
I also just wanted to say too that you said that the government said initially that masks didn't work and that was to build up a supply, and I do agree with that. But the point of it was the US government itself, the US Post Office, said that they were going to distribute 650 million masks, and that was shot down by the White House as to not cause fear and disruption. I mean, the Republicans in their opening statement said that communist China withdrew information from their citizens. How is it any different what the United States is doing with us? I mean, we need to know the truth and the actual impact of this virus. I mean, clearly it's impacted our lives for, at least the rest of this year, perhaps next year. I think it should have been taken more seriously, and the government, I think, should still be involved regardless.
And look, we can correctly blame China, but we definitely could have pushed much harder to fix what they have done and prepare for what they have caused.
I would say from the very early days of this pandemic, the Trump administration has been, in our view, very proactive in attempting to respond to this virus. Beginning before January had even ended, he initiated that travel ban on communist China that was eventually extended to the European Union when that became a hotspot. And then unfortunately, from that point on, this virus by both sides was utterly politicized in nearly every sense. You had Nancy Pelosi on February 24th. The travel ban went in effect on January 31st. On February 24th, Nancy Pelosi holds a huge rally in Chinatown, calls it xenophobic, a common sense measure to try and keep the people that are infected out of this country so we can buy ourselves time. After 15 days to sow the spread happened, the Trump administration initiated the Defense Production Act to source those materials that are so critical to our hospital. And while 200,000 deaths is absolutely tragic, this virus never should have become as big an issue as it did. And unfortunately, the medical team we offered to send to China was refused. No hospital has been overwhelmed. No one has been denied a ventilator. Everyone has been able to remain under that threshold and receive treatment.
Thank you, Republicans.
I would certainly agree with our friends on the Democrat side if they had not made the point that this was this administration was at the reason that we have all this confusion and all these things are going wrong. At every single level of government, whether it be global, local, national, or state, has failed miserably to protect the American people from this pandemic. It is not just that the reason that they said that masks were bad. Dr. Anthony Fauci admitted that it was also due to the fact that they wanted to keep those for essential workers who are working at hospitals. And so that they communicated as such that they were not necessary. For whatever reason that they did it, without making it clear to the American people, it was unacceptable. And they led to a lot of lives being lost. And that is the issue, that the government can do that and then put the blame on the American people and say, well, you're not wearing masks, so it's your fault. You're the one who's killing grandma and grandpa. It is not our fault, it is theirs.
I also wanted to add the point on the fact that the administration did not do a good job from the start. We have something in place called the Defense Production Act, and that allows the government to take over businesses and produce medical equipment that was needed. Obviously, we had a shortage of masks. We had a shortage of ventilators. There were a ton in Federal Reserve that weren't even working. If this was done sooner, a lot of lives could have been saved. And on top of that, the administration didn't even agree with wearing masks and didn't even go out wearing masks until just recently. I mean, the entire administration itself just caught COVID. So I don't know how you could say they're doing an amazing job with coronavirus if they themselves caught it.
Look, we could have, we had these lockdowns. We could have done something about it before. We have nowhere close to enough testing and tracing that we needed. And that's on the Trump administration themselves. They didn't take it upon themselves to get the American people what we needed.
Yeah, so going back to the question, what should we have done initially? I think the libertarians brought up to this. It is critical, whatever our government knows about this virus, the American people should know it as soon as the government finds it out. The government should exist to inform the American people of the risk associated with the virus, and then allow each individual citizen to gauge that risk on their own and make a decision based on that. The government should have focused its resources solely on two things. One, informing the American people about the risks, like I just mentioned, and two, focusing on people with pre-existing conditions that made them more exposed to harm from coronavirus. If you look at some states that were busy sectioning off some specific aisles in Target where you couldn't buy toys, but you could buy food. Meanwhile, they were putting sick patients into nursing homes surrounded by people who were most vulnerable from the disease. And it is, it's the lack of, it's focusing on the wrong things again that made coronavirus as much of a problem. And going to the Trump administration, catching the virus, the goal was never to prevent people from catching the virus. The goal was, the virus is going to spread. There's no treatment for a virus. The only way we could stop it is through herd immunity or through a vaccine. The goal was to keep the cases below the capacity of the hospital. And we've completely lost touch with that goal because we've already completed it.
And then also, if we're talking about the proactivity of the response here, the Trump administration was responding in January while the Democratic Party was calling it racist almost up until March. And I think it goes into a great point about the masks and the tests. Problem is, a lot of those things we could not independently source in our country.
Thank you, Republicans. Young Americans for Liberty.
Okay. You guys can go back and forth on what the government should have done, but they tried to do it both in the beginning when they downplayed it, and then they're trying to do it now when they're just locking everything down, or, well, not now, totally, but earlier on. I mean, Ben was saying when the government exists to inform the people about the risks, you get politicized science. That's how you get where we are now. You have that problem with climate, you have that problem with a lot of things, okay? The government should not be involved in this kind of thing. Private companies do it better because you have more decentralized local help, and the government, especially the federal government, is just this nebulous thing way up here that is very out of touch with the American people today.
I just wanted to make a point really quick that the Republicans said that Trump was ridiculed by Democrats for the travel ban, saying that he was xenophobic. But I just wanted to note that no Democratic leaders went up and spoke against Trump's travel ban. Sure, he has been called xenophobic when he calls the coronavirus the China virus. Clearly, that is racist in a sense. And yes, his travel ban did initially help slow the spread, but the number of cases were already spreading undetected nationally. And because that we didn't have social distancing in place, we didn't have masks in place, and it just spread like wildfire from there.
And I can't imagine how much worse it would be in our country right now if we didn't have the leadership from the national government on helping us with the coronavirus. Like, it would be worse than it is now with the Trump administration. And they, like, Republicans just said the main goal should be to inform the people on the risk, and I totally agree. Can you get that for me? But Trump just got caught on video recently talking about how he was downplaying the virus to the American people. I don't know how you can call that taking it seriously and informing, being truthful with us on the virus.
Okay, college Republicans, you're next.
Well, to your first point about the comment that no Democratic leader called that travel ban xenophobic, there are tweets that are still on Twitter that would prove you wrong there. And I think a major problem is that this virus was spreading. Unfortunately, that wasn't our fault initially. You had water samples taken from Milan in Italy in mid-December that retroactively were proven to have SARS-CoV-2 virus in them. So clearly it had made its way out of China into Italy by mid-December, when the Chinese didn't even admit that this happened until January. So that's one problem. Did you have a point?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the problem is, and we agree with you, that you should not be downplaying a threat like this that is such a significant magnitude. But I would argue also, and Mike Pence did make this very clear at the debate the other week ago, their messaging from the beginning has also been allow the American people to make their own decision on the risk level that this virus poses. And I think if we get more into the economic lockdown response, the federal government has at every step of the way, and state governments as well, prevented the American people from doing that and made decisions that control their lives based on a threat that not everybody is the same to everybody.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some cognitive dissonance happening up here. So either the national government did a good job or they didn't. I mean, if you're undermining the virus, if you're contradicting yourself, putting people in danger, are you better for us? Do we need you involved? Do we need you at the state level? For example, Governor Cuomo in New York, people were praising him. He's doing a great job. Did we know that he sent forced nursing homes to take in thousands of sick elderly people and put them back in those nursing homes where they further infected grandma and grandpa, the people who we keep saying that by not wearing a mask that we're hurting. At every level, we have seen over and over again where the government has come in and done things that violated our rights and put us in danger. The greatest danger to us has been the government during this virus. They have caused the most death. The most blood is on their hands. And we're still claiming that they are the ones who we should look to for help. It lies with the people and it lies with the free market.
I mean, I pretty much agree with them, except for like the local governments have repeatedly reported that they need help from the federal government to be able to deal with the virus at all, local and state governments. And then on the point that the Republicans have made, we agree that China had, they could have handled this so much better. They could have reported it when it happened. Like, they hold most of the responsibility for what's happening, but that can't take away from us not taking the responsibility for 25% of the world deaths coming from our own country. We could have done better.
Earlier, you said something along the lines of what would it look like now if the federal government had made no intervention whatsoever? And I think, and to the libertarians' points earlier too about the government providing us data that could be biased. Really, what I meant with that is if they are collecting data on the virus, then we should be able to see those studies to be able to make calculated decisions for our own lives. But I think the outcomes without the federal government's intervention would be nearly the same right now, because it's up to the American people to know how much risk they're willing to take. So are you saying that without the federal government, the American people wouldn't be able to make the decisions to keep themselves safe and to keep their families safe? And at what cost do these economic shutdowns come to people? How many lives are being lost because of the economic shutdowns, and how many lives are being saved by them? It's hard to prove that any of these shutdowns have any sort of meaningful effect to prevent the deaths from COVID-19.
Okay, so we're talking about the economic shutdowns. It's arguable that we wouldn't have had to go to that point if we would have put regulations handle this safely. Like, if we would have worn masks and put that out there before the shutdowns would have happened, then it's arguable that we wouldn't have had to go to that point. And then the point that the federal government, that we don't trust the American people to do what's best for them, that's not true. What we mean by the federal government helping the state and local governments is helping them fund helping them fund so they have the ability to help their people and the hospitals get the PPE that they need. And I think that's what we meant by that.
Yeah, I think I lost my point. You start.
Okay. So I think a number of things are at play here. First and foremost, I think the way the shutdowns went about happening, I think that could have happened much more efficiently. I think you can do targeted relief package instead of these broad scale mass relief packages. Everybody gets $1,200 except college students because nobody likes us. There's a very specific list of people that are vulnerable to this virus, and I think you can isolate those people and say that if you do choose yourself to not go to work, then we can help you. I think a lot of the things also, to your point, libertarians, real quick, is I think you can have a very nuanced approach that the Trump administration did things right and things wrong. I think it can be both ways. And then also, as far as reacting earlier, they did make an attempt to react earlier. That was opposed by the other side, unfortunately. And also, I think it does point out some good underlying issues here, that things like the reagents necessary for our tests were only produced by 2 companies in the entire world, neither of which were in the United States. The strategic mass stockpile was not replenished after swine flu. All these different things led to the delay in the response.
Okay. Yeah, so there is an argument to be made where if you lock down the entire economy, you should provide money to people. However, there's no money left. I think almost 22% of all US dollars were made this year. Now, that leads to inflation, and that hurts poor people. So when you give everybody money, even if it's targeted or whatever, or on a mass scale, you're really hurting the people that need help the most, that you're claiming to help. But it's just doing them the most harm.
Yeah, earlier you said the economic shutdowns only came later because of our initial reaction wasn't sufficient enough. But I think if you look on the world stage, some countries had stronger economic shutdowns, some had weaker. And I don't think you're going to find a correlation of success between where countries that have the strongest lockdowns had the least number of cases and vice versa. I think the economic shutdowns have been proven to be slightly ineffective in that area. So there's no justification for how strict they are now.
The other thing I think you need to look at is initially the reports that were given to the federal government by various different think tanks and analysts were predicting that with no intervention, you'd have 2.2 million dead. That report was very quietly revised about a month or so after those corresponding intervention happened. And I think what you need to do, and it goes back to being informed and reacting accordingly, is as you get new information and as it became apparent that the hospitals were not being overwhelmed, you need to adjust your policies accordingly. And in states like New York and California, where these things were still in place, that did not happen.
Thank you, Republicans.
I hear us talking a lot about lockdowns and how they could have been done well and how they were done wrong. I want to see where this went well. Where did these lockdowns turn out better for the people in the long run? If the World Health Organization is saying that this had a detrimental effect on all of us, are we better off that our government stepped in? People lost their jobs, millions on unemployment. People were not able to feed their families. People struggled with mental health, forcing the lockdown. What area of the Constitution gives the United States, the government, the right to tell you that you can't provide for your family and that you must suffer in silence so that we can save everyone else? Where is the right given? I would love to see that part of the document, but I don't think it's there. It is unacceptable what happened with the lockdowns, and it was unconstitutional.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we agree that the lockdowns, nothing came out of it. But studies have shown that if 80% of people wore masks, it would be more effective than the strict lockdowns themselves. So my question is, why didn't the administration push for wearing masks? Even like these ones proved to be useful. They reduced the chance of getting corona by 65%. So why did the administration decline to distribute 650 million masks to every American, which would be around 4 for every American household? I just don't understand. We want to talk about the economy. Why aren't we talking about what works? We know masks work now. I don't understand why masks aren't being pushed to a greater extent.
Look, and it's just a question, like the libertarians' argument that we shouldn't be, like, the coronavirus caused lots of people to lose their jobs. Our economy is in, like, it's obviously not in a good state right now, one of the worst since the recession. But is the argument, like, we shouldn't be giving them money, like, after they lose their job?
Okay, thank you, Democrats. We're going to start with our closing statements now. Republicans, you mentioned you want to go first.
Yeah, so I think we have a lot of agreement with the libertarians here. I think the shutdowns were essentially ineffective at accomplishing their goals. The American people are able to assess their own risk management. And we look at, like, with the masks are effective, but at the same time, Americans should have the choice to go out wearing a mask. If there's a business, like, let's say Kroger has a policy that they created that requires their customers to wear a mask, that's fine. If I go to Kroger, I'm going to follow their policy because they own that store. And then Kroger can provide a safe environment for their other customers. But Kroger should also have the choice to not have to make that a policy. The response to COVID-19, the hysteria has really pulled away from our ability to look at it objectively, especially with younger groups of people, with like elementary school age children. The risk is really not there, and continuing these shutdowns is only going to cause more harm than it will good.
Yeah, so the CR has had a great point there. If Kroger is free to enforce its own policies on masks, social distancing, whatever it is, people can choose whether to go in there or not. If they're okay with maybe getting infected because masks don't work, or maybe they do work, whatever it is, I'm not going to debate the science. Whatever it is, they're free to go into that store or not. With a one-size-fits-all policy from the government, whatever it is, even if it's completely open or completely locked down, the government should not be making those decisions. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for every single person here.
Look, we agree local businesses should be able to make the decisions to help themselves. And if Kroger obviously Kroger like has their own policy on the customers having to be able to wear masks to protect their workers and their communities. Sorry.
We just wanted to restate too that the US is the top country above India and Brazil with coronavirus cases. What are we doing wrong? We needed to ramp up testing, but our average wait time for testing is still 4 days. We need contact tracing, but we don't have any community contact tracing. I could go to the grocery store with COVID tomorrow and pass it on to 5 other people and they wouldn't even know where they got it from. And we don't even have isolation for infected people. I mean, there's no saying that they can't go out and do whatever. And the point with wearing a mask indoors, whether the American person has the right or not, the government has made laws in the past that controls our bodily functions. You can't smoke indoors anymore. You have to wear a seatbelt when you drive. It's against the law not to. You get pulled over.
Okay, so that was it for our closing statements for the second question. Just a reminder before we head into the last question for all of the viewers that there is a Google Forms doc in the chat right now. And if you click on that, you're going to be able to ask questions that could be used for the Q&A portion after this next question. So I highly recommend that you do that. Okay, so our third question and last question before the Q&A section is, in the last few decades, we have seen the price of college rise increasingly. How do you suggest we make a degree more affordable to those who want one without losing the value of a degree? Who would like to go first? Start.
Okay, so let's take a look at what industries have increased in price far more than inflation over the past, like 2 decades. We've got childcare, healthcare, and especially hospitals, and college tuition. So it's just simple economics. When you get more people with guaranteed loans, guaranteed subsidies, whatever it is, into college, the price is going to go up. And now it starts a cycle. What the colleges do is they raise tuition just a little bit each year, just a little bit, and it adds up over time. So when the price is more than the federal government is getting, they're like, well, these kids need more money, so let's give it to them. And it's a cycle. It keeps happening. Now, what happens is you get colleges that try to get more and more students with things not academically related, like rock climbing walls, lazy rivers. I mean, Oldie Bankrupt actually is a good source for this. At UC, a fact that stood out to me is that almost 30% of UC administration are not related to academics at all. You get this kind of thing happening all across the country. Now, the difference between, let's say, the four-year university and a community college is that community college price is a lot lower than the four-year university because they have none of the amenities that are here. So we need to get the free market back into colleges. We cannot keep subsidizing these colleges, and otherwise they will continue to do this.
All right, Republicans?
Yeah, I agree. I think government subsidization of colleges is probably the main driver of the increase in cost. I believe it's since the 80s, the cost of tuition has doubled in real value, so adjusted for inflation. I think another, and to your point to the administration, only 30% being devoted to academics, I think one of the huge causes, like you were kind of describing, is that higher education has lost touch with its basic purpose, which is to provide higher education. And going with the doubling of costs since the 80s, the salary of professors has actually grown at a slower rate than the increase in tuition, but the number of administrators in schools has grown faster than the increase in tuition. So the administration and the government subsidies are probably the two main drivers of the increasing costs, but also culturally, more people now feel it's necessary to go to college. So the natural higher demand is also raising the prices. But when you have the higher demand coupled with the government subsidies, that's allowing colleges to charge more and more money without losing any of their base. People will pay it, and so they're going to raise the prices.
All right, Democrats?
A college education in America is extremely valuable. I mean, it's really hard to get somewhere without one. I mean, if you look at 20 years ago, you could go out and get a job anywhere without a degree, and it wouldn't matter. But today, it's like a master's degree is what a bachelor's degree would have been 30 years ago. So we agree that college is important, and a lot of these capitalist little intricacies within college, like you said, the lazy river. I mean, we have to pay $300 a year for parking. It really deters from what we're here for, which is an education, and to contribute to society after we leave here, and the economy. So we agree that it's a key to better jobs, and create smarter workers. So we should be able to create college we should be able to create college education for everyone, really.
Okay, we're gonna move on to rebuttals now. So we have 60 seconds. Young Americans for Liberty.
Okay. So the entire reason that college tuition is so high is because of what the UC Democrats said. Everybody thinks that college is necessary to, the upper echelons of society. You do not need a college degree to be successful. Telling everybody that creates degree inflation, where you have everybody with a degree and they're all worthless because everybody has one. That's the reason why 30 years ago, you could get by with a high school degree, like you said, but now, with so many Americans having, degrees, companies can pick and choose which candidate they want. If they have a candidate with no degree and one with, they're just going to choose him, even if there's no other distinguishing factors. You just cannot have all these students in there, and it's not the only path to success in America.
Yeah, I think you guys bring up a great point when you're saying that. The reality is, and I already see this argument, if you're going to continue to tell everybody, every single person, regardless, and I know a lot of people here, I know a lot of people in general, I know a lot of people do this. They go to college, they don't know what they want to study, they're just there because they think they have to be there, and then they end up after 4 years with $120,000 in debt wondering what happened. There are other options depending on what career path you want to do. There are 2-year certificates, there are trade schools, there are on-the-job training internships, different things that I think we do need to push a little bit more in general. But then also, what I think we've done a good job, everybody, in showcasing is that this is a very complex problem. I think you have an element of significant, you take the same problems you see in federal bureaucracies with the waste. I think you can translate a lot of this trends to college administrations. You take an element of it where it's departed from education, and now it's a little bit more, for better or for worse, about an experience, and you have rock climbing walls and lazy rivers, and that's going to drive up cost. And then always, the more you subsidize, the more prices are going to go up.
Thank you, Republicans.
Yes. College is a reliable pathway to the middle class. The jobs of the future require a degree. And one of the things that we advocate for is loan forgiveness for college graduates and public service who agree to work in communities in low-income communities. Thank you.
Loan forgiveness? Isn't that, so you're giving, they're not poor anymore, right? They're just middle class. The rich people all have college degrees, okay? If that's who you're professing to help, right? Usually are about helping the poor. The poor don't have college degrees, okay? Yeah, it's like that. Want to say something?
Oh yeah, okay, let me get in here. All right, so first thing, one of the things is that people have been trapped into the idea of college and are going down this path. College, it could be useful, but for what you're getting offered versus what you're paying and what you get trapped into long term, it's not worth it as much as it used to be. For example, you can, once you take all those student loans, you would think that, well, if I get a little too rough, I'll just file for bankruptcy. Actually, no, that's not going to happen. Actually, the government made a law that won't allow you to file for bankruptcy due to your student loans. You are trapped in this, that you will pay that $50,000. You will pay all those loans back, and it will eat you. And that is the system that we've created, where the A&S department at University of Cincinnati has a $0 budget. where an administrator at the University of Cincinnati can waste $2 million on a bad investment, and the people still have to pay for that. That is unacceptable, and college is not worth it if that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, I don't think the degree is not what moves people up in class. It's whether or not they were able to increase the marketability of their skills while they were in school. A degree is worthless if you come out of it with no skills. And I think when we're all taking all of our classes online, degrees are becoming especially worthless because the standards required to be successful in education, I think everybody would agree, have dropped. So college is essentially worthless if you don't come out on the other end with more skills than you went in. And you need to be able to improve your worth in the marketplace as a laborer enough to exceed the cost of your education. And funneling as many people as possible into college isn't the best way to help them. There's many of the trades pay significantly more than starting positions people will get from a bachelor's degree, and that's something we should focus on.
Yeah, we do agree that trade school and even technical school itself, I mean, technology jobs are rising exponentially and there's not enough roles to fill them. Those are two great options as well. But as the libertarians stated, you have someone with skill and a college degree, you're going to hire the college degree. A degree means something in this country. I mean, we could play all day, oh, it shouldn't mean something, it didn't mean anything 30 years ago, blah, blah, blah. But it does mean something today. We said that. I mean, you go to Harvard, you're going to get hired, you know. But the important thing we need to focus on here is getting education to people who normally wouldn't have it. I mean, we talked about how community college is cheaper than a university. Well, why can't we make community college free? And why can't we give loan forgiveness to people in disenfranchised communities, especially teachers who are in inner cities who are making just above the poverty line? I don't understand why that would be an issue for people who are giving back to the federal government.
Okay. So free college is probably the worst idea we could implement to solve this problem. Free college is just going to amplify the incentives we already have in place, where you have college administrators just taking in all this money to raise prices even more. Somebody's got to pay for that service that you're providing. If it's not you, it's going to be the government. And the government's money, they really have no incentive to keep it low because they can just spend, do whatever they want. If you have free college, even community college, it would lower the quality of education so you get less bang for your buck. I mean, it'd become almost worthless again. It would be like having a high school degree today in maybe 20 years. Really, it would just devalue the degree so much that it might just become the next high school. You might have to do it to be able to function in society at all.
Look, students who want to go to college should have the option to go to college. We can argue about this, but the economy of the future needs college-educated students in the technology field. Like, these are the jobs that are going to become more open. And the U.S. values equality. We should help low-income students to have the same ability to go to college as upper-class students. Without aid, low-income students would not have the same opportunity to get a degree as rich students. If we believe in equality, we should be helping them have the same ability to have a college degree and get the education that they want.
We certainly agree that everyone should have access, and we believe in equality. But what the system that the government has created does not set up for that, actually. With student debt, with loans, you're actually saddling people with things that they, for years, will continue to carry on their backs. We see generations that are saddled where most of them are struggling to pay off their student loan debt, and that they cannot move forward in their careers because they are constantly weighed down by the student loan debt that they have. This is not equality just because the government is giving you loans. You are actually setting people back and putting them further down the line where they will be stuck in the lower working class because they can no longer move forward due to being saddled down.
Yeah, I think to their point, attempt at free college is going to increase the effect that the subsidies have had. The spending will become more irresponsible. And who's paying for this? Because there's still resources expended to provide an education, whether or not the person receiving it is paying any money directly out of their bank. So who's paying that bill? Is it Americans who didn't go to college who have become successful in the trades? Is it small business owners who didn't go to college? They're paying for other people's college degrees, even though that they didn't need that to be successful. And this is where the issue arises with it. And if we remove government intervention, that would allow the community colleges probably to lower their price even more, and that's going to make it even more accessible. So then if people should only be going to college in the first place, if they're going to be able to come out on the other side with a marketable skill. So if community colleges, if we can remove the subsidies, if we can remove the administrative overload and lower the cost, then the loans will be a profitable investment for people in lower income brackets to make. And they will be able to come out on the other side able to pay off their loans. The free college will only make it worse.
I just disagree that a college degree could be invaluable because education is valuable. I mean, if you have educated workers, you have a better working business. And currently, the rich are paying lower tax rates than the working class. Let me repeat that. The rich are paying lower tax rates than the working class. So the Republicans want to talk about, oh, we're going to tax small business owners, we're going to tax the trades. We're not saying that. If you tax a small percent of the top, I mean, you're already getting this money back.
Okay. So the point of college, most people go in order to get a job. They don't go in order to round themselves out because they want to get all these loans and subsidies in order just to become a well-rounded person. You know, they want return on their investment. It's very expensive, and all these people aren't going, just to become a better individual themselves. The degree that you get from college is the most valuable part, even if it is less valuable than it was decades ago. There's no really reason to be educated if you're starving because you can't get a good job.
You cannot simultaneously say that there is an unfair incentive to go to college and then say we need to fix that by further incentivizing going to college by people who do not necessarily need to be. A high school degree is less valuable because everybody has one. You give everybody a community college degree, now you got to give them a bachelor's, then you got to give them a master's. A poor policy is still a poor policy, and you do not work towards equality by furthering poor policies. You work towards it by improving the conditions in other ways.
And to add to what you were saying earlier about taxes, and the wealthiest individuals in our country, the top 10% of income earners actually pay 70% of the total income tax revenue currently. And historically, there's been shown no correlation between raising the top tax bracket and raising tax revenue. Actually, generally, when the top tax bracket is lowered percentage-wise, the total revenue is actually increased. So to write it off saying that the wealthiest individuals in our country will provide free education for everybody, it's not a viable plan. And there's no data to support that it would actually work.
Look, the only reason that the rich aren't you said the higher rates that they have to pay, the less income we get from it. The only reason that's working is because of the loopholes in the system to where they can get out of having to pay the taxes. And then second of all, I mean, you said, the college education is not, you said, the high school education, my bad, is not valuable as the college education because everybody has it. The college education is more valuable because it teaches you the skills that you need for the job that you're going into. It's demand.
I would say that you just proved our point very well. Your argument is that high school degrees are less valuable because everybody has them. And then if you can't simultaneously say that there are a wide variety of different options that you can choose, be it two-year degree, be it trade school, be it technical school, that would give you the skills to compete in the jobs market. And then also say that everybody should have a free degree, which would make that degree worthless, which would give everybody that piece of paper. Some people might have those skills, they might not have the skills. It's still the skills that are being transferred that are going to give you competitiveness in the market. And we need to be looking at how best to bring those to people and cheaply, not just flooding the market with worthless pieces of paper.
And I think what serves that well, if you look at some of the billionaires, if we're talking about the 1%, a lot of the billionaire business owners in this country dropped out of college. And it wasn't the piece of paper that made them wealthy, but it was the skills and abilities that they had. College should only increase those, and the paper really doesn't mean anything if you don't know what you're talking about.
Look, college makes individuals more competitive in the job market. There's demand for people, like the job market, it has demand for people coming out of college. And we're not saying that like trade colleges and like trade schools like are invaluable. They obviously are. It's just and also we're not saying that we should have free college. We're saying that we should be helping students who don't have the ability as many other Americans to go to college. We should be helping them have the same ability to go. So we have equal opportunity for all students in America.
It seems like this group loves tangents and not answering directly. I think I probably started that by not answering the question directly. I think one thing that the issue here is about college tuition and how to make college more affordable. So the question is not necessarily about value of the college degree, because by the question, we're assuming that it has some sort of value. The point is that the government got into this system and again, mucked it all up, as it does many things, and put people in a position where they can no longer afford to go. And if they do go, then they will be saddled with debt that they cannot afford to pay off, and they will not be allowed to go into bankruptcy for. And so for the rest of their life, they will spend trying to pay back this student loan debt for a degree that didn't get them the job that they want and didn't prepare them for where they wanted to go. And now they have to get a master's degree they can no longer afford and get saddled with more debt. And this process continues. We have to remove the government from the system and get the free market involved.
Thank you, Young Americans for Liberty. At this time, we'll start our closing statements. Would anyone like to start? Back to Yao.
So yeah, we did get on a little tangent there, but making college more affordable, like Julius was saying, we need to get the government out of it. We cannot subsidize more and more students to go into college, otherwise they're just going to keep raising prices. And I mean, even then, you get degree inflation, like I was saying earlier. So really, we need to give people the choice and ability to go to any college, but not funded on the taxpayer's dime. If people realize that there's a government program out there that will just give people money for a certain cause, they won't give as much money to charity for it. So there's definitely a lot of options for people that still want to go to college, even if they may not be able to afford it at that time.
UC Republicans.
So again, going back to the point that we made at the beginning of this, I think you have a very complex and multifaceted problem here. On one hand, you do have the issue of degree inflation, which is happening. It's something we've seen happen, started with high school, and it's moving more and more towards master degrees now, to the point where we're at. And you do need to work to combat that stereotype that the only way to be competitive in today's market is to go to a traditional four-year college or university. Because again, it is the ability to have those marketable skills that makes you competitive in the market. And then as far as the problem with colleges now, again, going back to some of the points that were made earlier, you have a degree of problems there that are driving costs up. You have government subsidies and the intervention of government. I don't think it's effective in the market that is driving prices up as you bring more guaranteed money in. And then also you have a tremendous amount of administrative waste in most of these public colleges and universities. Partially is due to the misunderstanding of what that is for. And that's a choice people need to make when they decide where to go. But then also you have a tremendous amount of waste that I think needs to be handled by those different administrations.
Thank you, Republicans. UC Democrats, your closing statement.
Look, in today's increasingly globalized and technology-driven economy, 12-year education is just not enough for American workers to remain competitive in the middle class. Roughly 6 in 10 jobs require some kind of education beyond a high school diploma. I'm just saying the solution is not to stop helping low-income students have the same equal access to education.
There you go. All right, so thank you, debaters. You all brought up a lot of very good points. I applaud you guys, and I know there's a lot of virtual applause going on as well. So at this time, we're gonna move on to our audience Q&A section. So I'm just gonna give us like a 3-minute break so that everybody has time to fill out the question survey, and we can start asking our debaters. And then I'm also going to post a post-debate survey in the chat for whenever the debate is over. So we'll reconvene in like 2 or 3 minutes.
stuff coming.
Yeah.
Quiet, please. We are now starting the Q&A portion of the debate. Our first question is, what is the purpose of the Second Amendment and what is its role today? Told you guys want to answer this one. Anybody? Young Americans for Liberty.
Okay. The purpose of the Second Amendment was primarily to prevent tyranny from the government. The founding fathers realized that taking away guns from the general populace made it easier for soldiers of the main government to come in and basically do whatever they wanted with the people there. So the Second Amendment is important. It's not for hunting, it's for protection from the government.
And if you think that tyranny and is occurring right now with what the protests are about, if you think that there is a tyrannical overtake by our president or our government, you should be supporting the Second Amendment and not supporting gun control. All of these things that you feel are things that guns were created for, to protect us from.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. They kind of covered the main basis of why it exists. I'd like to go into more of the gun control aspect. I think a lot of, when you hear about common sense gun control, or if we look at like the assault weapons ban, the government will, when they try to limit our Second Amendment rights, they often try to take away certain types of firearms or certain setups of firearms. And I think most people that are educated on firearm use and about firearms will understand that that really has no effect. And really, any limitation on the type of firearms that can be purchased or owned, aside from some huge military weaponry, is really just walking step by step in the direction of completely taking our firearms away. And that's something we should be careful of.
I mean, look, we agree that it's to keep a free state, and the ability to have, for citizens to have arms should not be infringed upon. But we do support background checks just to keep weapons out of people who are not mentally capable of having them, just to keep other residents safe.
And we also agree with the fact that, yes, education does promote civility with using guns. I mean, you see people who go and they get like 40+ hours of training with their gun and they're able to conceal it. I mean, those are not the types of people that are committing these violent acts. It is people who are mentally ill and are somehow able to find a loophole to receive a gun.
Thank you, guys. We're going to start with our second question now. What is your solution to illegal immigration and opinions on abolishing ICE? We're going to start with UC College Republicans this time.
So we obviously believe that illegal immigration is a very serious problem that this country faces. for a number of things. I think first and foremost, I'm going to make the argument that you have a massive humanitarian issue on our southern border, and that is on our end and their end. The reality is that you have a significant element of drug trafficking, a significant element of human trafficking, a significant element of all of these different crimes that I think everybody here agrees are some of the worst crimes that can happen to another human being. And the reality is that our law enforcement, especially ICE, there's a critical role in deterring those crimes, preventing them, and then helping the people that are most affected by them. And that does include a border wall, and that does include border protection.
Thank you, college Republicans. DC Democrats.
Yeah, so with illegal immigration, most illegal immigrants overstay their visa, and that's really the aspect of it. Yes, there are issues on the border control, but really with ICE, it shouldn't be abolished completely, but instead should be reformed. I mean, we're seeing people locked in cages, we're seeing children being lost and separated from their families. I will admit there was fault both on the Obama administration and the Trump administration. We're saying there should be an overall reform with this in general, and not just specifically on one administration.
Yeah, and the obsession to build a wall does not address the security challenges. We need to invest in a smarter border technology that would improve cargo screening.
Okay, so as for illegal immigration, we believe that opening up the borders more and really limiting the flow of immigrants is not a good thing. More people will help our economy, will help us in general. I mean, keeping these people out isn't necessarily the best idea. As for ICE, since they are illegal in the few cases that they should be, they are like police in that they enforce the laws, so they should be kept around. They should not be abolished.
Yeah, people deserve a chance to come here. The wall and people crossing our borders are not our main issue. The people who are actually creating the biggest issue are people who are overstaying their visas.
Our next question is.
Our next question is, do you view healthcare as a human right? We'll start with you, UC Democrats.
I mean, I think the coronavirus pandemic has made this very clear that it is a human right. I mean, you see so many people sick and ill that, I mean, it's only obvious that it should be something that everyone should have help with, either provided by the government or by a private institution.
But people who need medical help should be able to get it in some way, shape, or form.
Young Americans for Liberty.
So healthcare is not a human right. If you think about what a right is, it is something you're entitled to, based on your status of whatever. But since healthcare is, it's a service, it's a product, you could force somebody to give it to you if it is a right. So who would you enslave to give you healthcare if it is a right?
I agree with that, because a right is something that is protected. It's not something that is given to you. But also, for instance, we have the right to bear arms, as we were just talking about the Second Amendment. But I guarantee you, not everybody in this room owns a firearm. So just making something a right does not increase its supply.
And yeah, I would also agree with the fact that healthcare is not a human right. It is a service that I think undoubtedly has made the lives of everybody on this planet better and longer and more fulfilling. And I think the argument about healthcare is how to best maximize that, how to maximize the new research that's coming out that's providing life-saving drugs, which America produces 70% of, and how to make it most affordable while not sacrificing quality to the largest number of people.
Thank you, Republicans. Okay, so our next question is, the Senate is scheduled to confirm a new Supreme Court justice next week. The last time there was a vacancy in the court was during the last presidential election. At that time, Senate Republicans made the case that a new justice should be nominated after the election. Should the Senate vote to confirm Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court before this election? Young Americans for Liberty, we'll start out with you.
Um, I don't know what argument can be made for her not to be confirmed in the sense of like it being unconstitutional. It's not. The only reason that one of the reasons that people are speaking against this is because there was like some type of precedent that you don't do this. This is part of government. You don't, not everything goes your way. And so if she is confirmed, that should be allowed to go through because there's nothing that constitutionally or lawfully blocks it.
Look, we totally agree. There's nothing, it's obviously constitutional to put her through. The argument is, in President Obama's last term, Senator Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham decided to make a precedent stating that we should not, presidents should not be able to nominate somebody in their last term. We should leave it to the American people to vote. And now, since it's the last term of Trump's 4 years, that rule has been thrown out the window. Lindsey Graham simply stated last year that he would not allow, he would not vote for a Senate nominee in the last year of President Trump's 4 years. And they've totally went back on it and decided to put it through anyways. So it just shows that some people in the Republican Party don't have backbone.
All right, here we go. In 2018, the American people voted in confidence of and to expand the Republican majority in the Senate. And in 2016, they voted for President Trump. And like people are saying, he is elected for 4 years, not 3, not 3.5, not 3 3/4. So in that sense, the precedent is on Senate Republican side. Amy Coney Barrett should be voted on and confirmed. And I am going to be completely honest and completely blunt and maybe a little bit unpopular here. After what the Democrats in Senate did to Brett Kavanaugh during the last confirmation hearing, falsifying those accusations, not just to blow up the confirmation, but also his reputation and his family, I see no reason to abandon precedent in favor of allowing that to not happen.
That seems like a guy with some backbone.
Okay, so we're gonna go to our next question. Okay, the wealth distribution in this country is worse than most people think. In 2012, the top 20% wealthiest people had about 5 times more money than the rest of America. Is there a reasonable way to fix this, or is this just the way an economy works? Start with you, UC Democrat.
So we live in a capitalist society, so of course there are going to be people at the top, but I don't necessarily think that people should have that much money, because in this country, money is power, really. I mean, for example, like Jeff Bezos could have completely stopped the California wildfires or ended world hunger for a year if he wanted, and he doesn't. And I think that's just sick and greedy.
I mean, look, the Trump administration has put policies in place to where the rich have the lowest, have to pay the lowest tax they have in years. And so the Democratic plan would just be to increase taxes on the rich. And I don't think that's not fair to be able to do.
Like I said earlier, there's been no correlation between increasing the tax rate on the rich and increasing tax revenue. Normally, when the tax rate is decreased, the tax revenue actually goes up because economic growth happens. Secondly, the economy is not a zero-sum game. The rich don't become rich at the expense of the poor. And third, the amount of people in any income bracket at any given point of time is irrelevant. What is relevant is the ability for wealth mobility and the ability for people to move into different brackets over their lifetime, which the U.S. is one of the best countries in this area. And if you look at people over multiple decades, it's a small minority of them who actually stay in the bracket in which they started. Most people have upward mobility in this country.
Okay, so a lot of people, or a few people having a lot of wealth is not a problem in itself. Inequality of wealth, it just isn't a problem. Like, as long as everybody in the country, in the economy, is getting better over time, and we are, okay, we are. As long as some people do very well, like let's take Jeff Bezos, for example. He created this amazing company, Amazon, for everybody to enjoy, and I'm sure everybody in this room uses it today at some point. He deserves success, and he deserves to be wealthy for what he did to help, America and the entire economy. So no, it's not that big of a problem in itself, and we should not, tax the rich or do whatever and remedy that.
Okay, we're on to our next question. No one has mentioned college readiness. Within Everyone Gets In attitude, are colleges becoming degree mills where less motivated and less prepared students get a degree that is constantly being devalued? UC College Republicans, we'll start with you.
So assuming I'm understanding the question correctly, I think that highlights a lot of the points that I think everybody here has made tonight, is that if you have this incentive that is in place in a cultural stereotype, that the only way to be competitive in the job market is if you have a traditional 4-year degree from a college or university, then you are going to have a large number of people that feel pressured to go to those colleges and universities, take on hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt unnecessarily, and then they leave that without the skills necessary to be competitive in the job market and down hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think that goes back to the argument where you do need to look at other options, and I think every person needs to make the decision what is most in their interest, what do they want to do, and what's going to be most financially viable and give you the best skills for the lowest cost necessary to compete in the market.
Sorry, could you explain, or sorry, repeat the question again for us?
Okay, so repeating the question, no one has mentioned college readiness. Within Everyone Gets In attitude, sorry, are colleges becoming degree mills where less motivated and less prepared students get a degree that is constantly being devalued?
I feel like that's what, okay, yeah, that's what the general conversation was about. I think we think that colleges are becoming a space where they are bloated and they are overpricing the product that they're giving students, knowing that students will not be prepared for the market that they're heading into, and they're continuing to raise the price to gain more profit and then to use that money to do other things that aren't beneficial to the actual students. Our system of college is no longer fitting the people that it was created for, and no longer fulfilling its primary purpose of higher education. It's fulfilling the purpose of padding the pockets of the administration.
So currently a third of Americans without a college degree are or underemployed. And that just goes to show, I mean, we've been talking about trade schools, we've been talking about college and technical schools, and that just goes to show that more education is valuable in this country and gets you further.
I mean, there are more students than ever going to college, but colleges are also competitive. They usually want to accept better students, and better colleges that want better students. It's a competitive market.
All right, so our next question is, should the filibuster be kept in the Senate? And it's for everyone. So we'll start with Young Americans for Liberty.
Whoa. You guys are throwing haymakers today. Okay, can you ask it again?
Should the filibuster be kept in the Senate?
Should the filibuster be kept in the Senate? I think our only question is it constitutional? If it is constitutional, which I believe it is, then it should be allowed to remain. Unless there can be an argument made that such a practice is unconstitutional, unless that can be made, then it should remain. And that is our argument.
As far as I understand, the people suggesting to remove the filibuster would be the Senate Democrats. And I think this is a long pattern. The filibuster is constitutional, but also I believe removing it would also be constitutional. It's just a matter of changing the policy of the Senate. But this is another thing in a long pattern of things Democrats want to change only when they aren't benefiting them. Democrats have historically gladly used the filibuster when it benefits them. The Democrats, when benefited from the Electoral College, like it, but when not, they don't.
Look, Republicans have done the same thing with the filibuster. That's not really an argument. And I do agree with them that the filibuster is not in the US Constitution. Thank you.
All right, so our last question of the night is, what is your opinion on court packing? UC College Republicans, we'll start with you.
So obviously, I don't think it's going to come as any surprise that I am categorically opposed to the notion of court packing. I think the Supreme Court is an extremely important institution and one of the three pillars of, I'll borrow a phrase here, of our democracy. And I think if you're going to use that as a political tool, which unfortunately I think it's already devolved to a political tool on both sides, that both administrations from both parties use, obviously as a political prize, and I think that in and of itself is bad. If you are going to further that to just say whenever you lose that, whenever you don't have majority, the second you regain power, you're just going to expand it to put yourself in power, you go down a very dangerous road, and I don't think that is a road that you will recover from. And then if you look at historical precedent for things like that happening in other countries, that is not a road when you treat your institutions like that other countries have been able to recover from either.
Look, I actually agree with them that it is constitutional to court pack. Like, it's nothing, like, it is constitutional, but it shouldn't have got to this point. It's the country's polarization that has brought it here.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court in itself is really meant to be an unbiased entity that is for the betterment of the people. And really just packing it and making it one way or the other doesn't really make sense to me. And we agree with the Republicans that it shouldn't be like this. It really shouldn't.
Yeah, court packing is definitely bad. The Sierra said it right when, every president that gets elected could just add more and more justices until you have, thousands of justices. That's ridiculous. No, you should not be able to court pack at all. That would just upset the checks and balances of the Constitution that they try to set up there.
All right. So that concludes our Great Debate 10. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, debaters. You guys were all awesome. And thank you all for watching.
Make sure to do that survey.
Yeah, so be sure to take the post-debate survey. I put it in the chat. Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, have a good night, everybody, and stay
Bye,
safe.
everybody. Thank you for coming.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye, everybody.
Wait, don't. Oh, wait.
Can I leave?
Yeah, leave.